Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for the introduction and thanks for inviting me in this really nice talk in a really beautiful city. Actually, I arrived yesterday night, so still a little bit sleepy, but yeah, let me do my best. My name is Han from Seoul National University, and I'm gonna talk about basically how to scale up the data for better understanding human motions in the machine side. So let me just start my talk with this. Can I be here maybe? With this talk, with this image, with a question like why humans move the way we do. I think maybe the first reason is to basically manipulate the object, right? To somehow achieve the physical goal by moving some object here and there and interacting with the object. And maybe the second reason is basically to transmit some social cues, social messages to others. In this case, we are basically using our motions as if we are using our languages here. For example, by our facial expressions, hand gestures, and so on and so forth. By the way, still machines cannot mimic or perceive human motions as we expected. And this is not just a problem of hardware side. Even in the virtual world, although we want to implement some virtual avatar, which can somehow mimic. Any issue? Okay. Yeah, even in the virtual space, implementing such thing is not easy. So one really interesting research direction I have in my lab with my colleagues and students here is to endow machines with the ability to perceive and imitate human behaviors. When we pursue the direction basically by data, for that, we need to collect the data. We need to have a better representation for the data. And in the end, we need to know how to use such data. And nowadays, we all somehow know that the strengths of this data for this larger scale model. For example, in the language domain, image domain, there is lots of tons of data in the internet. And by leveraging that, we can actually make really powerful kind of AI system. The question is how to collect such kind of large scale data for human behaviors. Compared to maybe text or images, human motion data is really hard to scale because collecting that is actually a challenging problem. A bit straightforward direction to collect such data is basically by using this kind of multi-camera capture system. This is the example of Panoptic Studio, where I and my colleagues built at CMU about 10 years ago, already outdated. The system is already gone. But using this system, basically, the system has more than 500 cameras with lots of sensors. So basically using this system, we can capture human body, human motions, their face motion, body motion, and finger motion in a markerless manner. So this is possible. And nowadays, there is just more fancier kind of system in Meta and other universities. And using this system, we can collect their motion capture data, especially when people are interacting each other. We can actually measure those kind of all these motions all together. Basically, we can learn the correlation between one person's motion and another person's reaction and so on and so forth. Even though there is just other kind of nice data set, we all know the clear limitation of this data set. It's not easy to scale up this kind of data. And more importantly, the data set is largely biased because they are captured in the studio setup. And in fact, when we actually track the available data set, 3D human motion data set in the internet, including AMS and human ML, which are some kind of collection of 3D motion data, they are, I would say, less than $200, which is not sufficient to have, to learn lots of human motions. The question is then, what would be the next possible direction of our community to scale up this kind of data? Especially, we want to have a large scale data set. We want to collect such data set in the wild environment. More importantly, most of the existing data set, they just focus on human motion only, even though most of our real world human motion is really about human object interaction, especially including the finger motions and so on, as in the purpose of this workshop here. And one maybe possible direction is collecting such data from the 2D internet videos, right? Nowadays, there is just lots of nice tools to have monocular human pose, 3D human pose in a monocular fashion. We can also get the finger motion in a nice way. There exists lots of good system. This is the result of our front MocapEve. It's also outdated. There is just nice system there. But still, the problem is the accuracy would not be there yet, right? Although we are making lots of progress. So in this talk, I'll try to share our 3 efforts in pursuing this kind of direction. The first direction is by making a new multi-camera system. And second one is to collect such data in the IndyWire setup using lightweighted wearable system. And third one is to learn this kind of human-object interaction from pre-trained image diffusion models. So let's start with the first part. The ParaHome system, which is our new multi-camera system, led by my student Jonghan and Jisoo. So this is basically the output of the system where we have this natural home kind of environment, not supernatural though. We try to have, home style environment where the person is basically moving object, interacting with them, and we can capture their body motion and hand motion and so on. Importantly, we try to have this paired prompt information as well. So there exists already such kind of data set, but describing humans, the motion only by languages would not be very interesting because more interesting thing can be described in the case of human object interaction. So in our data set, we try to actually have this kind of text annotation so that we can see a person is doing what kind of interaction with which object. This is more example here. Put the slide food in the pan. You can see interesting interaction where the person is interacting with multiple objects at the same time in a compositional manner rather than atomic actions. You can see many other examples paired with the prompt. If you see our system here, very similar to Panoptic Studio, but more complicated version because now we wanted to capture the object motion. We have LED light, we have 70 synchronized cameras, lots of markers, and we have this IMU-based motion capture suit and gloves so that we want to collect such data in a collision-free manner because now our target is not just human behavior or human motion. We are more focusing on basically human-object interaction. We also attach these markers so that we can reliably track the 3D movement of the object. This is the views from all the cameras. Here, our main target is not the RGB images because although we have MocapEve-free RGB images, they are anyway biased by this studio setup. So here, our entire goal is about how to collect reliably this human-object interaction, in an accurate manner. For that, we also scan entire 3D object in the scene. If they are articulated body object, then we also try to model their articulated parameters so that we can only capture the parameters to get the entire motion of the object. Because we have full 3D, you can get easily the affordance cues as well, contact and grasping information. It can be rendered from a egocentric view like that. And in fact, the dataset is fully available. Feel free to visit our website. Entire dataset is about 488 minutes. All of them have paired text prompt information. And let me just briefly introduce what kind of task we are pursuing with this kind of dataset. So our goal here is to basically model the correlation between human behavior and consequential movement of the object. For example, when people are interacting with some object, there is just some specific pattern of fingers and the movement of the object by human behavior. And our very easy maybe way of modeling that is just modeling some VAE kind of space so that you can just concatenate all these cues here. And if you train this kind of VAE model, this latent code is actually somehow modeling the manifold information of this entangled manifold information of this object movement and human motions. That basically means if you just sample one sample here, that basically means some plausible interaction of human behavior and object motion. Once you can build this kind of manifold, we can actually use this to synthesize some unseen thing. For example, let's just assume that we are given some partial observation of human motion and the environment changes. Let's say our goal here is to synthesize some unseen hand. One way to do that is just using this one as the loss function so that we can find the best a manifold sample. And once you have the optimized manifold sample, we can just use the decoder to synthesize those missing parts as well. So let me just show you some example here. In this case, let's say our input is just given a desired object movement, and our output is to synthesize the human motion to make such kind of object movement. These are some examples here. You can see the object is moving like that. And what would be the expected human motion to make such changes? This is some synthesized human motions. We can do the same thing for the finger part. Let's say all these gray guys are the given input, and as output, we can synthesize the corresponding human hand motion as the synthesized out here. More example here. It's input, the magenta is the output. Right. So those are the first part of my talk, which is about our effort in collecting this accurate data from a new multi-camera system. The second part is about how to collect such data from more in the wild setup, especially as an example of live logging. Can you actually collect such kind of human motion data from very lightweight wearable motion capture system so that I can capture my own motion for really, really long time? If each person can have such kind of data and they are maybe if they are shared, then maybe that is a really good way to scale up this kind of motion capture data set. The problem is this kind of typical wearable mocap is not good for that purpose because it's expensive and it's very inconvenient. And here, our goal here is to make a very lightweight system. So our system has only 2 smartwatches and 1 egocentric camera here. In this case, we are using GoPro because the glasses types of thing was not available, but now we got the new area glasses from Meta, so we plan to use that as well. So you can see how easy to wear that. Jie, who is the leading author of this paper, in fact, her walking motion is a bit awkward, but at least you can see how easy to wear this kind of system here. So basically, our MocapEve system tried to infer the full body 3D motion from the egocentric video and IMU signals from smartwatches. Of course, this is very challenging problem because the observation we can get here as input is really partial information of the entire body, especially when you actually see the egocentric camera, the own body is rarely observable, right? Because we can at most see our fingers. So let me just very briefly introduce the method part here due to the time limitation. First, given egocentric video, we can get basically SLAM output, the 3D point cloud and the camera position. And then the later part is basically some regression-based method by just using this point cloud and the camera pose and IMU signal, we want to infer the full body motion. The problem here is if you assume the case like the person is just standing still without moving anything, then IMU signal doesn't provide any information, right? Because it can provide some temporal movement at most. That basically means standing still, sitting still are completely ambiguous in the IMU side. So one idea we have in this paper is to use this height information as well as a very crucial cue. The problem is to measure the height, we also need to measure the floor information as well. So as a result, this is basically our regression output by aggregating all this information in our network. Let me just skip the network part. We need to infer this flow information regularly so that we can also get the height in every location. And it turns out those information is extremely important in disambiguate the motion differences. Our module has further kind of things to get the refinement. If we do some human object interaction, the hand part is also available. So if the part is available in the vision sensor, we can additionally use that information. But let me also skip this part, but just show you some interesting result here. So this is the output of the regression. This is just molecular input video. You can see this bird's eye views. In fact, the space is pretty large. Our campus area, you can see the person's location here in the bird's eye view. Of course, the own body is never visible in this egocentric view in this example, but you can see the result is pretty reliable here. This is another interesting example where the person is interacting with some object, such as making coffee. Unfortunately, we cannot get hands yet. We are strongly working with that part as well. If multiple people are wearing the similar system here, basically we can put all the system in the same 3D world because basically we can put the cameras in the same 3D world space in the SLAM output here. More result here. Occasionally, other people's scene is visible from the sensor. Assuming the camera input are shareable each other, we can additionally use such information if needed. I think I have about 10 minutes. Oh, 20 minutes, right? Yeah, I started at 10. Okay, so I think that would be sufficient for the last part. So let me move on to the last part. So the last part is learning human-object interaction from the pre-trained diffusion model. Along the direction, I'm gonna briefly introduce our two papers, CHRUS and COMa. So CHRUS was published in ICCP 23. The first author, Sugan, is a undergraduate intern, and this paper was oral, and he has another oral paper this year. He's now in military service, but he got the new kind of very unusual cases to attend this CCCP. But anyway, the motivation of this work is to learn this 3D spatial human-object interaction pattern from just many 2D images. For example, when we are interacting with an object, we know that there's just some specific pattern we are making. Interesting thing here is those patterns are not unique. There can be many, many different patterns in different situations. So learning this kind of diverse human-object interaction for many different objects is very challenging if we try to do that using our own data collection. Maybe the ultimate direction is to learn such a thing from 2D images, right? Because 2D images partially already include such kind of cues. The problem is, if you collect 2D images for such purpose, collecting itself is not easy because internet images have lots of noisy things with lots of outliers. Some of them, many of them even don't have writing byte sequence, for example. They are somehow commercial kind of website and so on. So collecting such a data set is never easy in the internet. An alternative solution here is to use pre-trained diffusion model because diffusion can provide very nice 2D images as well. Of course, they are not photorealistic compared to the real images, but this is, I think, the result from 2 years ago. Nowadays, we have much better system, and it's sufficient to learn human-object interaction pattern. And the really strong advantage of using the pre-trained diffusion model for image generation purpose is we can actually do some prompt engineering so that we can have more kind of result in what we want. And the big advantage of using this kind of method is basically there's no limitation in object categories because basically you can synthesize any HOI images. So the goal of our course paper, and this paper's name is CHRUS, the goal of our course paper is to basically infer or model this kind of 3D spatial relationship between human and object by just giving a keyword of target object alone. So this is another example here. More specifically, we do the modeling in the canonical space, and the HOI pattern in the canonical space can be deformed in any other deformed space because basically this 3D field is following basically the LBS skinning of the SMPL pose movement. So basically, we can make the HOI pattern in any specific human poses. More importantly, our model can capture diverse human-object interaction types given the same object category. For example, a person riding a surfboard, our output can be something like the following. A person carrying a surfboard should be very different from the riding a surfboard, and our model can capture such things as well. Again, let me very briefly introduce the two modules for this purpose, data generation and aggregation. So at the very beginning, we are given the target object category, and we have this kind of query template, generate at most 20 simple subject sentences. We just put this category here, and we just basically use LLM to make many, many diverse to the text prompt, which is the input for image diffusion model. So let's assume we are given, we start with this one prompt, a girl ride a skateboard, which was basically provided by ChatGPT automatically. First, we add some viewpoint augmentation. And that basically means we can actually add some view information as the additional part on the prompt. For example, back view, top view, side view, and so on. And from each prompt, we can generate the images. The goal of this viewpoint augmentation is really to diversify the object, the image viewpoint. So the image diffusion model doesn't necessarily follow the exact instruction, but that's fine because our goal here is really to diversify the viewpoint. So given this prompt, we can basically make lots of images. Some of them are not valid, so we have a straightedge to filter out those ones. And given the remaining valid one, we can basically apply the monocular pose estimation method so that we can get the 3D human pose from diverse view when the person is interacting with the object. And then the later part is to get the plausible object location given the human's pose, 3D poses. That is very similar to basically the visual Hall reconstruction. So you first get the 2D mask, we just fuse the information in the 3D space. The problem is if you just directly apply some naive aggregation, because the poses are very different each other, they are not coherent. So our strategy here is to model that in a post-canonical manner, which is very commonly used in the monocular dynamic human pose estimation field. So we just apply such method so that we can aggregate these cues in the canonical space. So let me just directly show you some result here. Bike or motorcycle, automatically computed, umbrella, skateboard. This is some example of different semantics, even though they are all, both of them are the HOI for the bike example. The commuter standing next to a bike. In this case, you can actually see the donut-like shape around the person. And in this case, the cyclist is pedaled by the bike. In this case, you can see some more typical pattern in HOI case. All right, let me move on to the last part, which is the paper we present in this CVPR, comprehensive affordance, and we call that as COMa. So the previous work was interesting because it can get the spatial relationship between object and humans from pre-trained diffusion models output. However, it can only capture some partial HOI information because if you actually think about the HOI pattern, there are just many other patterns. For example, if the person is interacting with the screen, there is just very typical orientation of your face, right? So although the spatial relationship was there, it cannot capture this orientational pattern. More interesting thing here is, it's not just about the face. Every body part of our body have very specific pattern when we are interacting with the object. For example, if you think about the proximity information and contact information, orientation of the information of the hands, that should be very different from such information from the face. So ideally, we would like to compute all these kind of pattern for every possible pair of face, a human body, and object. That's what we call comprehensive affordance here, which we call COMa. So COMa can capture the contact information and the spatial information and the orientation pattern all together. Especially we model such a thing for every possible pair of human body and object. Again, in this case, we leverage this pre-trained diffusion models output. All these are synthesized. You can see the quality is much better than the one from 2 years ago. And in the case of COMa, we started from a 3D object for the target category. For example, surfboard here. And the output of COMa is to get all this pattern in a exhaustive pairized manner. And we have two pipelines basically, the sample generation from which we can get diverse this 3D sample. And all this information will be aggregated as a form of COMa. So first, we are given a 3D object here, and we render that to many viewpoints so that we can have basically multiple view of the target object. And then we invented a in-painting method so that we can basically put the 2D humans in the image side. And then we do the 3D pose estimation. And finally, we do the lifting so that in the sample space, 3D sample space, we can have both human and object all together. Our goal here is to make diverse kind of HOI samples, which can actually cover the entire HOI space of humans. So there are two important modules. Due to the time limitation, let me very briefly introduce that. Feel free to visit our poster if you are interested in this kind of method. So first one is called adaptive masking painting. So the goal here is really to inpaint the human on the already rendered image side. If we just use vanilla inpainting, basically we are given this bounding box and we wanted to inpaint the human, but that tend to change the object as well. So our goal here is really to preserve the object part as much as possible. For that, in our case, we try to change the mask adaptively at each iteration. As a result, we can preserve the object more than the original method. The second one is about how to lift the 3D sample from the 2D. Here, maybe for human part, we can use human pose estimation, but what we want is lifting both human and object, which is quite challenging. Our idea is to leverage other images as well. Of course, they are not geometrically consistent because they are generated by inpainting separately, but we found that they're still useful for this purpose. Okay, so as the output, we can get this kind of diverse samples. And the later part is about how to aggregate this information all together. So given one sample, for example, our goal here is again to get the pairwise information. So given a point i's point of human body, j's point of object, or vice versa, we can have one such sample for the proximity and orientation. From another sample, we can get another information. From another sample, we can get another information for the same object point and human point. Basically, our goal here is to aggregate the information of such pattern. Sometimes the pattern will be uniform, or sometimes the pattern will be very specific. But anyway, we try to collect such kind of pattern so that we can get all this proximity, contact, and orientation information all together. So let me just show you some example here. Given the object 3D, first we can get the 2D images, synthesized images from which we can get the 3D sample. And finally, we can aggregate all this information. Basically, it can be applicable any given object, for example, tennis racket. These are many other objects. You can see many weird kind of objects because, yeah, there's no limitation in applying all this thing. Maybe guitar, the broom, many other things. So in our test, we tried on about 100 object categories. Of course, you can try this more. The only cost we need to spend is basically the computing power because we need to synthesize many image samples. Given this kind of result, we can actually see many interesting patterns. For example, here, if you just click one object region, you can basically get the corresponding human contact information. If you choose, for example, left handle, you can also get the corresponding contact information. This is the case for the chair. Backside, you can see the plausible contact information there. We can also get the information for orientation tendency, for example, here. In this example on the left side, if the human pose is something like that, our model can recognize it's more plausible than the other case. Basically, we can see the alignment between the current pose and the one we learned from the data here. So red means it's more plausible, blue and green means it's less plausible here. One very typical application of COMa is just directly using that for the optimization. For example, if we just use contact omni optimization to position the human to the object side, this is the result. If we do that with entire representation of COMa, you can see this kind of output. Let me just play this again. So we just directly optimize the pose so that it can minimize the loss in our model space so they can more fit it to our plausible motion space. Yeah, contact only, because in our case, we can actually have entire information, proximity, orientation, everything. So this kind of thing can be possible by just using simple optimization, which can be used for any prior model or any other applications. All right, I just briefly introduced our work. The leading authors, Sugan and Hyunwoo, will be more than happy to introducing the details of our work. So let me wrap up my talk here. I try to introduce our 3 different efforts in scaling up this human motion data so the machine can learn the human object interaction or human behavior in a better way. And all this work is done by my amazing student. I'm just talking their results. So feel free to reach out to my student here or via email. They will be more than happy to answer your question. Thanks for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any question. Thank you.